All right, this first topic is solving quadratic equations using the square root property. So you can go ahead and read this box here. This explains what the square root property is. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the first example. So we have example 1, where we have x squared equals 36. We're trying to find out what x is. So the x squared has already been isolated, so we can undo that x squared by square rooting both sides. When we square root both sides, we have to take into consideration that the answer could have a positive or negative square root on the right. So we have plus or minus the square root of 36. Then we simplify. The square root of x squared is x. The right side, 36 is a perfect square. So we have plus or minus 6. Now what's nice about any of these problems here is you can go ahead and check your solution if you want. You could substitute 6 and negative 6 back into the equation. Second example. We want to undo that x squared. So we're going to square root both sides. We do need to take the plus or minus of 49. Simplify, we get x minus 2 equals, and then 49 is a perfect square, so 7 and negative 7. Now we need to move that 7 to the right. I'm sorry, that 2 to the right, so we add 2 to both sides. Now we're going to have two solutions. So I'm going to say my first solution is when I add 7 to both sides, giving us 9. The second solution is when I subtract 7 from both sides, giving us negative 5. So our two answers are negative 5 and positive 9. Example 2, find the roots. So with these, we need to isolate the x squared term. So we have to do some of our inverse operations. So first, we're going to go ahead and subtract 3 from both sides. And then simplify. 131 minus 3 is 128. Then we're going to undo the 2. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. And we're left with 64 on the right. Now we can go ahead and apply the square root property. We take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus in front of that square root. And then we simplify. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 64 is plus or minus 8. Next one. Again, we need to isolate the x squared, so we subtract 11 from both sides. Simplify. 59 minus 11 is 48. Then we undo the 4, so we divide both sides by 4. And then we simplify. 48 divided by 4 is 12. Now we can apply the square root property. So we take the square root of both sides. And then we simplify. The square root of x squared is x. And now we can simplify the square root of 12 farther. So I'm going to change that 12 into a multiplier of 4 times 3. The square root of 4 is going to be a perfect square. So the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 12. And then this simplifies down to 2. So plus or minus, the square root of 4 is 2, and then the square root of 3. Next one. I'm just going to write the equation again. And now I'm going to move that 20 to the right so I can isolate the x squared. So I'm going to add 20 to both sides. and then simplify. So 5 plus 20 is 25. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And then simplify. Now we can go ahead and apply the square root property. We square root both sides. I'm just going to come over here. So now the square root of x squared is x. And now we can take that large radical and separate it into two radicals because they are both perfect squares, and that'll help us. So I'm going to take the square root of 25 divided by the square root of 4. They are both perfect squares. And then simplify them separately. So I get plus or minus, the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 4 is 2.